So let's go ahead and get started because I really want to get to our conversation today. So hello and welcome everyone to today's live Zoom event as we launch the latest report in our signature Women Give series. My name is Jeannie Sager, and I have the privilege of serving as director of the Women's Philanthropy Institute. Thank you for joining us. We are so grateful to have allies and advocates in our work and look forward to an engaging discussion today around the key insights and implications from Women Give 2021, how households make giving decisions. And as we get started this afternoon, the WPI team would love to hear from all of you. I know some of you are entering where you are and who you are in the chat, but I'm going to ask you to make a little bit of a shift. And I want you to consider how your own household makes charitable giving decisions. And in the chat, share with us who decides. So if you have a partner, do you decide together? Do you decide separately? Are you the main or sole decider? Let us know in the chat and begin thinking about this question about who decides as we share the research. So I'm going to share my screen. And let's get started. Women Give 2021 is the latest addition to our annual Women Give series. Along with around 24 studies, the Women's Philanthropy Institute has released since 2015. This research series has transformed philanthropy. We are excited to be able to engage in conversation with Yolanda F. Johnson, president and founder of YJF Consulting, and founder of Woke, Women of Color in Fundraising and Philanthropy. Adrienne Penta, executive director for the Center for Women and Wealth at Brown Brothers Harriman, and Marty Cordes, co-founder of the Cordes Foundation, to hear their experiences and perspectives on this latest research and report. For those of you who are less familiar with the Women's Philanthropy Institute, or WPI, we are housed at the Indiana University Lilly Family School of Philanthropy, and our mission is to conduct, curate, and disseminate research that grows women's philanthropy. Over more than a decade, WPI has researched the intersection of gender and philanthropy from many angles. Our research answers broad questions about how and why women and men give. We have conducted more focused studies on gender differences in impact investing, retirement, life satisfaction, and the intergenerational transmission of generosity. Giving to women and girls is another strand of research, with 6 reports examining this topic. Women Give 2021 looks at how households and couples in particular make decisions about charitable giving. Women Give 2021 is one of the many projects the Women's Philanthropy Institute has conducted thanks to the support of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. We are grateful for the Foundation's support of this research, but also want to note that our research findings and conclusions are our own. I'll start by answering the question of why this topic and why now. The last time we asked everyday households about how they made giving decisions was in 2005. Household dynamics and the role of women within the household have changed in the past 15 years. We wanted to update this important topic. Families have been changing in recent decades. Women's incomes are more important to families, and women are more likely to be breadwinners than they used to be. And understanding these dynamics and how they impact giving is important, since we know from Giving USA that giving from individuals and families accounts for at least 70% of all giving every year. And this percentage grows to around 86% when you factor in bequests and gifts from family foundations. To me, one of the key things about this subject is that it matters to so many households. Each household is unique and has different conversations about giving, and those conversations matter for how much households give and to what organizations they decide to give to. So let's get right to the findings, and we can grapple with any questions and implications during our panel discussion. The largest share of households make giving decisions together. That's 61.5% of households making joint giving decisions. However, this is a decline from 73.4% in 2005. When we consider sole decision-making, when one partner makes all the giving decisions for the household, we found that this is on the rise. When one partner in the household makes giving decisions, it is more likely to be a woman. In 15.3% of households, the woman is the sole giving decision maker, compared to 12.1% of households where the man is the sole decider. And individuals have different thresholds for how big a gift they will give without consulting their partner. This number is much higher for men compared to women. To better understand how people think about their giving decisions, we compared a number of different types of household decisions, and we found that charitable giving is most similar to short-term financial management. And just 1.1% of couples talk about giving with a financial or philanthropy advisor. This is clearly a huge opportunity for advisors to engage clients about an issue that ties so closely into their values. And finally, 3 out of 4 couples agree on giving amounts and recipients. Most couples talk about their giving at least a few times a year. And I love this quote from our chair in women's philanthropy, Deb Mesh, who is in the audience with us today. She says, "Giving has the potential to bring households closer together, especially when partners are strategic and intentional about their philanthropy." Women Give 2021 presents an opportunity for families to connect over shared values, explore how they give, and embrace the joy that comes from giving. At WPI, we know that connection, growth, and joy come when people give together, and we hope this report promotes that togetherness and joy. To close the research presentation, we wanted to provide some questions for reflection, and I hope you'll share your thoughts with us in the chat. So back to the question I asked at the start. How do you and your partner or family approach charitable decision-making? For fundraisers, how can you tailor your approaches to donors depending on how their household makes giving decisions? And for financial and philanthropy advisors, how can you help the couples and families you serve to be more intentional about their giving? So that's just a brief overview of the Women Give 2021 research. I hope you will check out the report and infographic, as well as our social media channels, where we will continue to share about the report. Look for links in the chat box. And with that introduction to the research findings, I am thrilled to welcome our panelists to the conversation. Yolanda, Adrienne, and Marty, welcome, and thank you again for bringing your expertise and passion for women's philanthropy to our panel today. So now that we've walked through the findings, I'd like to hear from each of you. What's one thing that stood out or what surprised you? And I'll start in alphabetical order by first name. So let's start with Adrienne. Adrienne?
Hi, how are you? So excited to be here today. I love this report. I think that it has a lot of data that helps me as an advisor working with families think about how we engage everybody around the table. And one of the things that I think is heartening is that we see, in households that one person is deciding, we see a lot more women being the decider, which to me, my focus is working with women and supporting women as they create and manage wealth. And I think that we see women having a much stronger point of view around their decision-making, around their values, around their mission when it comes to philanthropy. And then one of the other things that I think we'll get into a little bit more, which was heartening to me, is that more robust conversation about philanthropy creates more robust philanthropy. And this is something I've always said to clients, and I feel as if this study finally gives me the data to back it up, that we see where people are making decisions together and having conversations with each other about philanthropy, that it actually results in giving more, which is great.
Thank you so much. And it's so true. Have the conversation. It's so important to growing women's philanthropy, as you shared. Marty, what stood out for you? Anything that surprised you from the findings?
Yes, indeed. So hello, everyone. The report was full of so many interesting things, but what actually surprised me, and maybe it's just coming from my own personal experience and the way our family works, is the trend that couples are going to make decisions separately versus as a unit, which we've always done. And I always feel like that encourages so much conversation and different viewpoints. So this trend is really interesting. I see where it's coming and it totally makes sense. But I have to say, I was surprised by that, but it dovetails so well with all the women's organizations that are now set up specifically to help women in philanthropy, programs as to how to do philanthropy better, how to engage. So it makes total sense. I was just it was just surprising.
Yeah. Well, and it speaks to what our previous research has shown with regards to the fact that women like to give together, but they also like to talk to each other and consult with each other about their philanthropy. So the fact that there is this rise in organizations that have come together around this to help other women, it really matches up with the research.
Oh, it certainly does. And it's such an amazing resource.
Yes.
I mean, it's wonderful.
Yes. Yolanda, what about you? What's something that stood out for you? Anything that surprised you?
I was surprised by, and hello everyone. Yes, I'm thrilled to be here. Thanks for having me. I was surprised by the same thing that Marty just mentioned, the trend, because as far as I exist at that intersection between fundraising and philanthropy, and so it's been the case to the point of the study, 61.5% of couples making the decision together, because we've started to wrap all of the research and learning about donors and learning how to approach them and appreciate women donors. We know so much is left on the table as far as women donors is concerned, because fundraisers aren't approaching them correctly. So that'll be very interesting to see what happens if those giving decisions are starting to trend toward separate sort of decisions, the steps that will need to be taken even more so now to ensure that cultivating female donors is top of mind and that it's taken very seriously.
Yeah.
Not that it isn't right now, but we know there's a lot of work to be done as far as that's concerned.
Yeah. And I think what's been great about the research coming out of this report is that it generates more questions and more potential to dig a little bit deeper into the survey results. To look at other aspects of giving and how households make giving decisions. And so this report really focused on couples and found that while the majority of couples make giving decisions together, as Marty and Yolanda have kind of latched onto with regards to one of our findings, that this number is declining. And Adrienne, in the work that you do in the space of helping advise donors, and women, what do you think this might be?
So, I thought a little bit about this, and I think it is so often because there's so much on our plate as individuals, as families, as decision makers. And one of the things that I say all the time to women is you have to have a seat at the table. You have to be part of this conversation about finances. And you don't necessarily have to be involved in the nitty-gritty of every single decision, but you have to sit at the table. And so often I hear back from couples and families, well, we divide and conquer, right? There isn't enough time to do everything. And so, I do these things, my husband does these things, and then we come together for the really big decisions. And I think there's a lot of that happening here too. And in sort of trying to ratify my own theory on this, I did a little bit of research, and there's a study that came out a couple of years ago that said families have on average 37 minutes of quality time together a day. There's just not enough quality time in the day for families or couples to make every important decision together. So I think that they do tend to divide and conquer. And I think that that happens frequently, especially with the everyday decisions about philanthropy. And there's some really interesting information about how big the checks are that men and women feel comfortable writing separately. Mm-hmm. And I think especially with some of those smaller check sizes, it's like, yeah, I'm just going to write the check. I don't have time. I don't want to waste my 37 minutes tonight talking about this gift. I'm going to do it. And we're going to use our 37 minutes on something else that's blowing up around the dinner table with our children.
Right. That's a great data point, and speaks, I think, to all of us when we think about our own families and our own households, and trying to figure out what is that time, how much time is spent, right. And how intentional you have to be sometimes. And in the report, you'll find we did a little we contemplated what that might be, why this change might be, and we did kind of talk about this idea of divide and conquer, and some demographic shifts and generational gender shifts in how we manage a household. Marty and Yolanda, do you have anything that any musings or thoughts on why this number is declining with regards to couples making giving decisions?
So just a quick add-on here. Just like we were saying earlier, it's like I thought from my perspective it was joint. So I was curious too, as why is that happening? So I believe part of the research also shows that couples are getting married perhaps a little later, and they've already had the opportunity, one, to perhaps make their own income and already start building up their own financial resources, as well as having already been interested in and probably even already supporting a specific cause. So when you, as couples join together, they don't want to let that go. They just continue to bring that with them. So I think that it's a combination of different things, but I do think that delaying marriage a bit has something to do with it.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, in particular because so often, as we're getting married at a later age, we have our preferred causes. We arrive with some philanthropic habits already in place, and already come to the marriage with kind of these expressing our values through generosity. So there wouldn't be a reason for that to change, especially looking at the other research data points that says that most couples are generally happy with regards to their partner's decisions with regards to giving. So Yolanda, anything else from you on this before we move on to the next question?
Sure. I think the last thing that you just mentioned really stood out for me. I actually don't find the two bits of research to be mutually exclusive. I see somehow how the dots connect in that the trend may be toward, an individual focus, but what I've heard from people directly is this appreciation for what their partner brings to the table. Really eyes being opened, minds being open to different causes, to different good work that's being done in the world. And I also know from personal experience that often this means that the giving levels raise. Right. Because that may not be my philanthropic priority as my partner or my husband, but I appreciate it very much and actually get to know them better through some of their philanthropy. And so then I am excited about that, and I'm saying, let's up the ante. Let's look at all of our giving, and let's, or it may ebb and flow. What's going on with your priorities right now? If something major is happening, let's really give it a push and get behind it. So I think it's a lovely sort of balance that we see between the two.
Mm-hmm.
I love that. And as part of the resources that we developed for this report in particular, we did create a couples giving plan. So we'll throw that in the chat, the link to that. But it does provide this opportunity, as you said, as you shared, Yolanda, for couples to be intentional. Maybe take 15 minutes of their 37, Adrienne, and go through this plan together, maybe just once a year. Yolanda, I want to stay with you and kind of build on this, this opportunity for couples to kind of share and then grow their philanthropy, because as Adrienne mentioned just earlier, when you have more conversations about philanthropy, then you do more philanthropy, right? So what do you think are some of the key takeaways for fundraisers? So putting your fundraiser hat on, and how can they respond to these changing dynamics while also engaging both members of the household?
Well, I think there are probably two primary points to make here, two pillars of the conversation. The first is one of the pain points for the fundraising industry right now is record keeping, and really getting to know and cultivate and understand those who are our donors' philanthropic priorities and where they're coming from, their backgrounds, what motivates them to give, and what your organization has to offer to connect with that motivation. And so I know that oftentimes you know a few things about people, but you don't really dig a lot deeper, and that's for many different reasons. It can be because of capacity, staffing, lots of different things. But I think this is an area that really needs to become a better priority, because the more that you know, the more that you understand, the more effort that you put forth to that cultivation process, the more you'll be able to tap into both sides of that coin. So into the couple, into the unit, and then possibly even as individuals. So I think it would be a missed opportunity not to see it from every different perspective. I have one partner, I have the other partner or spouse, and they're a collective unit, but they're individuals, and they should be treated as individuals with individual motivations and inclinations. And then you see how they come together possibly as a unit as well. So it's the record keeping. And then I think that this is also an opportunity for multi-generational and next generation giving. Whenever you have the couple, and then you may have children or even other relatives that may be interested in the causes that they support. I think, that 37 minutes, again, we're all going to go back to that like a ton.
I hope that's right.
But I think that it really opens the door for many more conversations. Once you know your donors better, you can approach them in a more intentional way. I've seen the philanthropic dollars grow because of that. And I think there's also room for change for fundraisers to look and see, what does this mean for the next generation? What does it mean for your legacy? And what does it mean for what you're going to leave behind, and how you're going to engage others in your community and in your family to give as well? I think it's a great opportunity.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Adrienne, let's pivot to looking at this report through the lens of a wealth advisor or a philanthropic advisor. And so only 1.1% of households, and this is a general population household, consult a financial or a philanthropic advisor when thinking about giving decisions. So kind of a similar question that we asked Yolanda: how can financial advisors do more to engage with their clients on philanthropy? And why is this important? It's a great soapbox for you. I know.
It is. I'll try to contain myself here. So I was shocked by that number, and it is inexcusable for financial advisors not to be having conversations about philanthropy with their clients. And it is not a value judgment to say, would you like to discuss philanthropy, or could you use my help thinking about your philanthropy, is not a value judgment on anybody about how philanthropic they are or whether they should be more philanthropic or anything else. It's simply taking that part of their financial life and bringing it into the conversation, because you have no idea whether or not your clients are philanthropic and to what extent unless you ask them the question. So there's a lot of financial advisors on this call, and if you're here, I know you're already asking the question, but I think it's really important to make sure philanthropy is part of the overall holistic conversation about wealth. And even more than that, one of the most important conversations that we have with our clients is about how their values drive decision-making about wealth. And philanthropy is the easiest and the most accessible conversation about how your values show up in the world. And a wealth management conversation is not just about how you invest your assets. It's about how you invest, how you spend, how you give, and how you save. So if we leave that giving part off the table, then we're not having the full conversation with our clients about how they're deploying their wealth and using it for themselves and others in the world. So that's the advisor part of the conversation. And, you know, going back to this idea that more robust conversations about philanthropy create not only more giving, but I think they create better giving. And what I've seen in my experience is when you can have a really thorough conversation about the intention behind your philanthropy, underwriting your mission, coming together as a family around philanthropy, whether it be a couple or whether there's adult children or a rising generation in the picture, then you actually have a philanthropic plan that does more than just give money away, that does more than just creating an income tax deduction for the family or for your tax return. It creates a real purpose behind what is this wealth for, and how do we want to put it out in the world. And there's only good things, there's only positive things that come from having those types of bigger conversations. And oftentimes you do need an advisor in the room with you to navigate some of those conversations, because sometimes there are conflicts. Sometimes not everybody's on the same page, and that's actually okay. That can drive better long-term decisions about philanthropy. It can help you refine mission. It can help you have a more multifaceted purpose behind your philanthropy, but it's usually not one quick conversation. Usually it's part of a longer conversation that can be facilitated and can be driven and can result in really long-term positive, not only for the family, but for your philanthropy.
So we've gotten quite a bit of action and chat around some things that you've just shared. And so I'm going to ask you to kind of stay with this for a minute. Is the lack of asking about philanthropy about training with regards to advisors and learning to ask, and what is your advice on that?
I think it is in part. I think it's so I think first it's creating an agenda for your meeting and asking your client what they want on the agenda. This is something that almost, everybody that I work with does, so that we can have a client-driven conversation. We're approaching December, we're approaching year end, we're going to talk about tax planning, we're going to talk about rebalancing your portfolio, we're going to talk about harvesting losses. Would you also like to put philanthropy on the agenda? It can just be, and so do we want it on the table? Do we want it as part of this important conversation? I think is number one. And then number two, I think some advisors do become uncomfortable when they feel like they're pushing anything on their clients. They feel like their job is to do exactly what their clients want, which it is. However, I think that there's a lot of ways that we can ask about philanthropy that have zero value judgment attached to them. Just like we wouldn't tell our clients where to give their money, we're not going to tell them when or how the right way to do it is. I think that saying, do you want to talk about philanthropy with me, is not saying, do you want to be philanthropic? Are you a good person? It's simply saying, do you want it to be part of this conversation?
Yeah. And everything that you've just shared illustrates how complicated and complex these conversations can be, but how enriching they can be. And it is a fabulous transition to Marty in terms of thinking about how your family has made, and what the process has been from making philanthropic decisions with your family and your partner, or even engaging and asking the question, how have maybe you engaged with a wealth advisor or philanthropic advisor, and sharing with us how has your journey evolved over the years. I mean, this report is the first look since 2005. Have you seen some things change? So a lot of questions thrown at you, Marty. Go for it.
Great. So, our giving has definitely been a journey. Starting back when my husband, Ron, and I created our family foundation in 2006. That was shortly after the sale of his business. Previous to that, I pretty much had decided what our philanthropy giving was going to be or who it was going to be. We were making decisions together, but the organizations that we were giving to were pretty much organizations that I personally had been involved with. So when we decided to create the foundation, we weren't nearly as focused as we are today. For example, my focus was around supporting women. So we were supporting organizations across the board. We were supporting organizations that were working in health, that were working in water, that dealt with violence against women, financial literacy. We were literally across the board on women's organizations. And then we added my husband's interest, which was social entrepreneurship. So we were also working with organizations that were looking to create sustainable business models that were serving women. So there was still that underlying focus on women, but we were really spread across. And as we evolved, we decided that we really needed to have a more specific focus if we were going to make the deep impact that we were looking to make. So we decided that our guiding light would be working with organizations that provided economic opportunities to women. So we were moving forward with that. And then in 2014, talking about the next generation, our daughter Stephanie joined the foundation after having started her career in fashion and media. So she introduced us to the world of sustainable fashion and the millions of women across the global supply chain that we were now in the position to provide some support or enhance their ability for economic success through supporting organizations that would provide opportunity to women, economic opportunities to women. And at about the same time, we added a fourth member to our foundation and subsequently to our family, and that was Eric Stevenson, our daughter's husband. And so now the four of us together decide on where we're doing our granting, but we are all so much more focused. And what we have found from this is that our knowledge is deepened. We are completely more aware and in tune of the issues going on with the different organizations because we are now more focused. Consequently, we feel that we are able to bring a lot more value to these organizations beyond just writing the check. We are able to really engage and provide a lot more connections into our networks, just being able to participate with them. It is really allowed for us to provide a greater relationship with these organizations and make it more fulfilling to us as well. So I feel that we're on this journey and we will be continuing this journey and making a lot of iteration as we move forward. It's constantly evolving.
I so appreciate you sharing your story and providing this wonderful example. So a couple of things that stood out for me: the use of we, used we throughout the in answering the questions, which really illustrates the report. And back to what we've been talking about, that these conversations, you kept adding people to the conversation, which made your giving more intentional, which, as Yolanda shared earlier, with regards to couples having these conversations, this appreciation and learning from each other, because there's trust involved in that. There's a willingness to learn and engage, and then the importance of being focused and intentional, and sharing that with each other. Thank you, Marty, for sharing that story with us. I want to throw the next question to Yolanda, because from a fundraising and consulting view, I think this might be a good question. Women Give 2021 found that women have a much lower monetary threshold for consulting their partners when it comes to giving decisions. Through your experience, why do you think that is? And then we can talk about the research, what the research says about that. But on the ground, on the front lines, why do you think that might be?
Well, I think that that women have come a very long way as far as their philanthropy is concerned, especially over the last few years. And I think that women's philanthropy has become really a branch of and you know, a way for the individual to impact the future and the present, but also to just really put the dollars behind the change that they want to see in the world. And so I think that particularly for women, they feel fully equipped to make whatever decisions that they need to make for their philanthropic priorities right now. And I think that, you know, some of the things that came across in the chat were really interesting about a lot of different reasons why that might be. I think we can point to many different reasons, but ultimately it just comes through to the fact that it's an extension.
Mm-hmm.
It's an extension of ourselves and the change that we want to see, I think, so many times. And so that certainly can impact giving.
Yeah.
And Jeannie, just to add on to that, I think that this question is very parallel to the question I get asked all the time, which is, are women more risk adverse than men are, right? In thinking about finances and how they invest. And I don't know if the answer is yes. I actually don't think that women are inherently more risk adverse than men are. I think that they're more risk aware. And I think they want to check their own assumptions before they write a big check or make a big investment or take on a substantial risk. I think they're absolutely fine in writing the check. I think it might just take them a minute longer to say, hey, what do you think about this? Am I right? What am I missing? Am I missing something? Whereas men maybe have a little bit more overconfidence in their own assumptions and their own abilities, right? So I don't think it's that women have, you know, a gap in confidence or a gap in anything else or are more risk adverse. I think it's just that they want to be really aware and understand fully the ramifications of their decision before they make it.
I think in a lot of cases, it's a test gift. Yeah, Yolanda, go ahead.
Yeah, exactly. To Adrienne's point, I think it's an extension of ourselves. We've come a long way. We know exactly where we want to give, but we feel compelled to give, and women donors feel compelled to give when they do. They don't feel pressured. Mm-hmm. It's an extension of who I am at my own pace, mm-hmm. and at their own pace, and in their own time. And I think that often they're keeping an eye out on things. And ultimately, it's an investment, right? So I want to see this extension of me as I make this investment. How is it going to grow? How is it being used? What's the actual impact? And then I can grow it from there. I can make further decisions from there. But I think it actually points to more power in its own way. And that's the point I was trying to get across, is that we don't have to feel that pressure or overconfidence in something. It's a slower burn.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
I
totally agree with that. I think women tend to do more research into the organizations that they're donating to. So like Yolanda just said, knowledge is power.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Knowledge is power. And it speaks to, you know, when you combine it with the other research that we have at WPI, the idea that women give smaller gifts to smaller organizations. So back to Yolanda's point with regards to what we're tracking in the data. So a donor, a woman donor can be giving your organization $100 and not kind of rise to the top as someone that you want to consider, but she might also be giving $100 to 300 other organizations. So you're not factoring in her true capability because she is giving, maybe she's giving at a lower threshold to many organizations. So that's not giving you the full picture. And so you have to have the conversation.
You have to have the conversation, and have you done the research about the woman donor to understand exactly how it is that we give and how that person is giving, because she could be giving 100 to many other orgs, and she could be giving thousands to other orgs because she may not be seeing that return on investment, and the communication factor may not be there just to understand. So I think it's a lovely thing in its own way. Again, you just go at your own pace, and I've seen donors go at their own pace, and I've seen fundraisers who communicate well where that investment is going be far more successful than increasing those gifts over time.
Yeah, yeah. So there's been some great energy in the chat around couples giving jointly, where many of you in the audience are saying yes about educating one another about giving, and now you give jointly, but I, as the woman, have been the one that pushed the giving. I pushed him to find a cause, etc. Have any of you, Adrienne smiling, have any of you seen this in your own relationships in giving, or in the couples and the families that you work with?
It's so funny. That's one of the notes that I've written in advance of today, which is, what does jointly mean? Because, I'd say most of the families that I work with, most of the couples I work with say, of course we give jointly, but really one or the other. And it's more, in my experience, more often the woman is doing 90% of the work and the research around grant making organizations and proposals, and really vetting, especially with larger amounts. And her partner is certainly sitting at the table saying, yes, that's great. And so that's the joint part of it. But it's usually not 50% from both in terms of energy, activity, carrying the load of the charitable giving. So, I think we could probably talk for another hour. What does jointly mean, and what does that interaction look like? But it's definitely not the same for every family.
Yeah.
Yeah, for our family, I would have to say that jointly actually really does mean jointly. We pretty much, since we have our focus area and are exposed to a lot of different organizations, I think we all pretty much bring to the table equally where we want to give and how we should give. So, and we may be one of the few who do that, but ours has more of a balance, if you will, on what jointly means.
Yeah.
Mm.
And Marty,
that's really incredible. It means that everybody in your family is drawn to your mission in the same way, or to a significant extent. And that's very difficult, I think, for families to get to find one purpose that brings everybody to the table every time.
Okay, so yes, I totally agree with you. And it wasn't like when we started out, that's where we were. I mean, again, it has been a journey, and it has been trying to take the interest of everyone. First it was, my husband and I, and then my daughter, and then her husband. So the four of us, and where that intersection happens. And that's the circle of our giving. So that's the focus. So it does take a lot of work, and it has been done. We did, there's some wonder, and Adrienne, I'm sure you do this with some of your clients, but there's some lovely exercises where all the family shares their values, and they kind of talk and draw close and find the overlaps in where their interest and values are.
yeah,
That's great.
So I'll put another plug in for that couples giving plan that was shared in the chat, that helps couples be more intentional and strategic about their giving, just as you shared, Marty, by identifying values and having the conversation. And so what suggestions? So we talked a little bit about how couples who want to do so can do so. With the resources around the couples giving plan. But do you have any ideas on how can nonprofits perhaps facilitate this? We know that wealth advisors can, through some training, and that was some great energy in the chat around that. But so wealth advisors and philanthropic advisors have a space in this. What about nonprofits? Marty, I know as a grant maker, have you seen any of your grantees kind of do anything innovative in this space? And then, of course, Yolanda, with folks that you work with, any nonprofits that you see may be doing this for couples and donors?
I have seen a couple really interesting approaches to this, and at the same time, you have to be super careful while you're trying to bring in other family members and not distancing the one that you already have. So what I've seen is, for example, I sit on the board of an organization called Nest, and they have created events for the family to come to, for the spouse to come to. And so they're able to talk to the rest of the family kind of on a one-on-one, find their interests, and then go back initially through me to reach out to them about conversations they had. And I think that's a lovely way of doing it, because you're bringing them in, but it feels it's comfortable. It has a nice feeling to it. And it's just bringing everybody in with a particular interest or expertise that they might have that could benefit the organization.
Which speaks to how women want to be engaged generally with organizations, because they want the opportunity to learn, and they want to engage with an organization in many different ways before writing the ultimate check. Yolanda, any thoughts?
I echo what you just said. I ascribe to that Laura Frederick's educate, engage, ask. And so I think that certainly resonates with women. And then when it comes to the couple or the family structure, I think the greatest investment that I've seen nonprofits make, and that I suggest and highly recommend they make, is simply the investment of human resources into understanding the donors better. Having those touch points, having the opportunities to get to understand people and what motivation they have to give, both individually and then collectively, and then really finding those ways without what I call pretzeling yourself programmatically. But when you have organic links and ties that would be a lovely complement to these philanthropic priorities, if you know them, then you can think creatively even, and then engage and say, oh, well, how about this? And wouldn't this be great for you two to do this together, or for, the partner to learn more about, this aspect of what's important to you. And I think that simply engaging the staff time in order to invest in this element of donor cultivation is what's been most successful so far. And that's how you really get those long-term donor relationships, and both individually and collectively, just by taking the time. And I think that a lot of nonprofits, like I said, for whatever reason, that's not a criticism, don't take the time to make those particular cultivation efforts. And when you do, the results and the returns are exponential, really, and long-term.
Yeah, that's great. That intentionality on the institution side is so important, and particularly in attracting women donors. So yes, couples and joint companies is important, but the idea that women are continually driving philanthropy, whether solely or as a couple, is important. And so institutions need to remember that and create opportunities to be more intentional and deliberate. And that starts with making those investments in HR. Yes, absolutely. Thanks, Yolanda, for that. So as we close, I'm going to ask all three of you to kind of put your futurist hats on, because it is spring and we are looking at a new dawn. And I think generally we're feeling hopeful with the vaccines coming out, especially coming out of this pandemic. And so, given our current situation, the pandemic, we just celebrated the year anniversary when the WHO declared a global pandemic. Certainly the recession, which has really become a she-cession in so many ways. What do you see going forward? And do you think the women's financial situation will recover? And how does decision-making play into that? So will it change as the situation evolves? Adrienne, why don't we start with you?
There's so much there. So I think that what I'm seeing personally is that this year, this pandemic, the rising levels of disparity that we see in this country has been a real catalyst for philanthropy for many of my clients. And I think that for those who can give, though there will be no more important time than the period of time following this pandemic to put your philanthropic resources to work in a thoughtful, strategic, intentional way. And I see donors doing that from where I sit, which is incredible, that folks in a time of uncertainty, when so many people are still not vaccinated and they don't know what this year will bring, are, pulling more and more resources out of their pockets to say, I see need in my community. And the other thing that we're seeing is mission shift. And all charitable missions are great, but we have seen a resetting of mission towards what is most important now in a way that is very reactive to the need that is visible in our communities, around us, in our states, in the country. And that's also something that I think will continue as we exit this time of economic distress for certain Americans, educational distress, healthcare distress for certain Americans. And I think that we need to continue to be fluid and to meet the need that arises in 2021 and beyond, because I don't think that once this moment passes us that we're going to go back to the way it was before necessarily. I think that there's going to be ongoing need for philanthropy.
Thank you. And I've been hearing that around the country. Everyone's really leaning, so many people have leaned into using philanthropy, using and expressing it as agency, to see the work and the world that they want, and using philanthropy to get there. Marty, what are you seeing?
Oh my gosh, so many creative ways that organizations are getting through the pandemic. I mean, a lot of the nonprofits that we've supported have been able to pivot and start doing something different. For example, we work with a lot of artisans who were making jewelry. And yes, they've continued to make jewelry a little bit, but they pivoted to making masks. So they pivoted to doing something that was needed during the pandemic to be able to survive, really. And I think it has been so inspiring to see the resiliency of these organizations, and a lot of the things that they have learned actually aren't going to be things that will end once the pandemic is over. Some of these things are actually, they feel like it's actually even working better, and will continue to put these in place. For example, one of the organizations that we support works around financial literacy in throughout Africa. And they switched over to Zoom classes. Mm-hmm. And they have found that has worked so well. And they've been able to train more women than the in-person ones. So when this is over and we can be in each other's company, they will still continue to do Zoom. Yes, they will go back to doing some in person, but Zoom will also be something that becomes integral to the way they develop their programming. So I think yes, the pandemic has brought a lot of terrible things, but it has also caused a lot of innovation.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Great point. Yes, technology never goes backward. So we will be moving forward through this with all the lessons from the pandemic. Yolanda?
I would say that if the pandemic has taught us anything, and I call it the now normal instead of the new normal because of I see the light at the end of the tunnel there. But not to be macabre, but it really has brought home the fact of our mortality. People don't know who's going to end up on the other side of this thing still, even though we're making progress. And so when that comes to who we are as individuals, what I've seen is that all the good work roads that we're doing lead back to people. And to Adrienne's point about mission shift, I've seen some beautiful things. We know the thing that we know for sure is that donor loyalty has remained throughout the pandemic. Networks have changed, other things have changed, but it all leads back to people. So what is it about this organization and the impact for people and the legacy that I want to leave and the person that I want to be and how I want to interpret that and express that through the dollars? And so I've seen donors be completely open to unrestricting endowment gifts to saying, you know what, if you needed this for that particular program, keep the lights on. And I think that's been a really lovely thing. And we've learned most of all that we can't be siloed. And so a lot of dots are connecting between philanthropy in different sectors, all roads leading back to people and keeping us all going, because now we understand that it's really a human thing, and keeping all of this good work going. So everybody's trying to work together. And I agree with Marty as well that technology is not going anywhere. We will be in what I call a new reimagined future that will be a hybrid of all of the technology, along with coming back together again and getting to the heart of it all.
Yeah. And agree with everything that you've all said. And we'll say that one of the blessings that has come out of this pandemic is really not only people-centered, but community-centered. And this rise in mutual aid, and all the different ways generosity has expressed itself over the last 12 months, and really speaks to so much of what our research at WPI has shown with regards to how women want to lean into all the different ways that they can give. And while they may have, while this she session is real, and we have suffered a lot and taken on our shoulders so much of the pandemic and the needs. We've also risen to the occasion, as Marty said, and have been very innovative, and have given so much of ourselves to get us through this. So grateful to all of you who have joined us today. We love Launch Day at the Women's Philanthropy Institute, and we're so thrilled to add Women Give 2021 to our library and to the tools in your toolbox to really think about how to put this research to practice, and how you can use it to improve your work, not only to grow women's philanthropy, but to grow giving by all. And so a big thank you again to Adrienne, Marty, and Yolanda for sharing your expertise and insights. Absolutely, thank you so much for spending time with us today. I know you all have very busy schedules. So thanks again. Please visit the website, download the report, and share wide and far. And we'll see you again next time. Thanks so much.
Thank you.